Mallory Phillips, current board member and co-founder of Shelter WF. Shelter WF is a 501c4 nonprofit focused on housing policy at a local and state level. In addition to policy, we also focus on community engagement at both the local and state level, as we believe it's really important for people across the economic spectrum to be engaged in the topic of housing to make our communities more accessible and affordable for everyone. As part of our work with Shelter WF, we applied for the AARP Community Challenge Grant and were awarded $15,000 to put on a visual housing design contest. Over this presentation, I will discuss what the Community Challenge was, what our visual housing design contest asked of contestants, who entered submissions, who were the winners, what were some of the themes, and I also added a slide at the very end that kind of overviews other resources that are great for community connectivity. So what is the Community Challenge Grant? The Community Challenge Grant is set out to help communities be more livable for people across the age range and economic spectrum. It's part of the AARP Livable Community Initiative, and it really just wants to increase the quality of life for everyone. There were 3,350 organizations, nonprofits, government entities that applied for this Community Challenge Grant, and Shelter WF was one of 343 organizations that were chosen. So our design contest, we called it Design Our Future. And we chose this name as part of the kind of education process that we wanted to do in regards to upcoming growth policy updates in Kalispell, Whitefish, Columbia Falls, and across Montana. We wanted designers to really think about how could missing middle housing be designed to help our community members really reimagine how their neighborhoods could adapt to growth and change and do it in a way that is community centered, which is a really core value in Montana. After one of our first meetings with designers and architects, we found that it was really important to them that we find actual land in Whitefish that they could use as their canvas. And so we were able to find 2 different plots of land so that it could really help people actually imagine what some of these housing ideas could look like in Whitefish. So what is missing middle housing? Missing middle housing really refers to the housing type that used to be very traditional pre-car center development back in pre-1950s. And so those were duplexes, cottage clusters, townhomes, quadplexes, mansion apartments. There's lots of different types of housing that currently we don't see a lot of in many American cities. This housing type really promotes walkability and community-centered neighborhoods, which aligns really well with the work that we do with Shelter WF. What are some of the challenges and why might we not see missing middle housing currently? Really, a lot of it is zoning constraints. A lot of zoning does not allow missing middle housing by right in most Montana cities. Besides a few exceptions, a lot of the missing middle housing that you do find in Montana communities were developed, pre-1960s. 1960s is when a lot of Montana communities adapted zoning to modeled after a lot of other American cities. Another reason we don't see a ton of missing middle housing is that a lot of the developments that we see today, especially in places like Kalispell, are very car-focused development. And lastly, some of the things that we have heard that make missing middle housing challenging is the financing that makes it hard to actually construct these housing types. So what was the focus of the design contest? So as part of AARP, it was really important for them that these designs be accessible and accessible to not only those that are older 50, but also just people of all abilities. In addition to accessibility, we really wanted designers to think about how could designs be done in a way that could be more naturally affordable. And so we focused on affordability through size of home and density of homes. And we wanted to help the community members see how sometimes, due to zoning and design standards, affordability naturally is sometimes hard to come by. And lastly, something that we saw a lot about of over the 2+ years that we have been involved in housing work in Montana is often we hear that the housing doesn't fit the community. And so we really wanted to dig in and see if we could help the people in our communities understand better how housing can actually help community connectivity. So we had two options in our housing design contest. We had option one, design an individual plot within the zoning that currently exists. And then option two, we really wanted to give designers the flexibility to really get imaginative and go beyond the current zoning, to really show people how zoning is currently limiting some of the ways in which we can design, build, and really prioritize the community. We had many different judging categories for both the judging panel and the community vote. So we asked the judges to look at design, innovation, and creativity, market feasibility, accessibility, and universal design principles, community integration and fostering social connection. Again, I talked about it earlier, but kind of either with option one, does it comply with local zoning regulation? And if it wasn't, did they discuss like how it might not? And then option two, really like getting innovative with the approach to kind of push back against traditional zoning, and explore different types of housing that could be created without some of those zoning limitations. We also gave the option for designers to give more information around their presentation, explainer videos, and we really wanted to award those that were a little bit more creative. The timeline of our grant, we applied for the grant in spring of 2024. We heard back in early May. We had about a month to really get this grant written, or this design contest written and ready to launch. And so closer to the end of June, we launched. We set up multiple meetings with architects and designers to really engage them on our design contest, as we knew that we didn't have an architect or designer on our board. So we were learning as we were going. By mid-September, we had 11 designs submitted. October, as part of the community engagement aspect of this grant, we put on an accessibility focused community panel that I'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide. We also had an award ceremony, and we launched our Design Our Future magazine. In early October, we had a panel of panelists that discussed different ways in which accessibility is really impacted, both by like community design, such as sidewalks. As someone who was in a wheelchair, the young man on the left discussed just some of the challenges that come with physical disabilities and accessing public infrastructure and housing. And then on top of that, housing affordability. We discussed transportation. We had an occupational therapist who discussed like what happens when someone who has just gotten out of the hospital has to go into housing that's not accessible. We had local author Nia Malchek talk about her book, A Walking Life. A Walking Life really hit on so many of the topics that we tried to hit upon in our design contest. And lastly, Habitat for Humanity and kind of some of the challenges of trying to design accessible and affordable homes in the Flathead Valley. You can click on the link that will take you to our YouTube channel and the recorded event. Here are the 5 designs that were submitted for option one. Shelter WF really liked Anthony Edelman's design the best. That is a threeplex, and each unit created an opportunity for different needs. There was a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 1-bedroom. And we really liked the way in which it blended into the neighborhood, the way that it really met the needs of different types of people. So for design option 2, there were 6 entries. And then we have the winners. So Kimberly Marland, she submitted a duplex that blended into the neighborhood. It looks like a single family home. And Kimberly really took our contest seriously. She really thought about the different design elements that we were asking for. And she actually also won the option 2 grand prize winner as well. Workaday Designs was voted on by the community as the winner. And this is probably the most innovative design that we got. They really listened to how does a design kind of challenge the current zoning, and they explained kind of how it challenged the current zoning and how that design could potentially integrate into the backyard area. So this is an accessory dwelling unit. This is another one of Kimberly Marland's designs, and she really did a really good job at kind of giving people a lot of different options. There is the option to rent a garage, but it doesn't require a garage. And I think that thoughtfulness is really why she won the Panel of Judges award. Mark Waldo, his design was Shelter WF's favorite. We felt like Mark's design was really intentional, really gave a lot of different options of housing types. It really gave a nod to more traditional housing types in Kalispell and Whitefish. Really looked at the walkability aspect, and kind of we felt like this design specifically really took this piece of property and really like made the best use of space. So we were really excited about this design. So from the option 1 design, there was an emphasis on energy efficient solutions such as mini split heat pumps, soundproofing to provide right-sized, environmentally conscious housing options. These multi-generational housing had these wheelchair accessible entries, adaptive kitchens, accessible outdoor spaces. Common themes from the design 2, design features shared amenities like community gardens, courtyards, social spaces, promoted community bonds and walkability with the neighborhood. So a lot of shared spaces was really important within this neighborhood design. When designs incorporated commercial areas and public amenities, and this is where the community connectivity comes in. They create vibrant community hubs that support local businesses and resident interactions. Proposals included a range of housing types such as duplexes, cottage courts, townhomes, and mixed-use buildings to foster economically and demographically diverse communities. Shelter WF. So we looked at all of the designs and we really came to some conclusions. We felt community members are less opposed to housing more people in their neighborhoods if they feel that the density matches the feel and scale of surrounding buildings. The more that gentle density can be integrated into new and existing neighborhoods, the more community buy-in will exist. Project revealed that community members are eager to engage in housing discussions when they understand how design impacts their daily life. A lot of times, design is not connected to daily life, and people really disengage on this topic. The contest format helped demystify housing concepts, making complex ideas more approachable and fostering a sense of shared responsibility within the community. The lot used in option 2 really helped people visualize development that could have transformative change on the community and throughout Montana through creating development that does not currently exist. And then the creation of more mixed use areas outside of downtown of Whitefish should prioritize local community members. Currently, we hear a lot about how the downtown of Whitefish is really prioritizing tourism. And this is a sign of gentrification when locals no longer utilize spaces that were once built for them. This designer neighborhood, this property specifically, could have a really huge impact. And they have the opportunity to create some of the community that we have felt disappear since COVID. Commercial space should be designed in a way that local, less affluent individuals could potentially start businesses that serve that, like the community in the off season, such as like a local arts and crafts store, clothing store, movie theater, ice rink that's, outside. There's lots of different ways in which kind of a second downtown could really prioritize locals and kind of transform the way that people feel about growth and change. Because currently, a lot of growth and change that is happening in Whitefish and frankly across Montana is not focused on people that currently live here, and honestly, not really focused on future residents either. A lot of the growth and change is really focused on those high dollar tourism, and Montana has a history of boom or bust, and we really need to create communities that are more resilient. We want a place like Whitefish to have a pretty diverse economic base that is engaged with one another, and it becomes more resilient to adapt to some of those boom and bust cycles. Lastly, I just wanted to share some other resources that I found while researching these topics. One really interesting thing that I added here was winter placemaking, and it really focuses on how do you design spaces that can be utilized year round, and especially in winter, which I think is a missing piece in a lot of developments in Montana currently. Outside of our ski resorts and ice skating rinks, there's not a lot of good outdoor spaces that people can kind of build community with one another. I also added the AARP housing guides. AARP does a ton of work on housing policy across the country and has just a lot of really useful tools. I added one around placemaking. I kind of mentioned placemaking, but there's just a lot of ways in which design can be done to connect community to one another. And then lastly, I added a community co-op in Traverse, Michigan that I was able to visit in the springtime. And this co-op really focused on kind of that community element. There was art galleries, there was food, there was art, yoga, all sorts of really cool spaces that really centered around the people that made Traverse, Michigan a really warm and cool place to be. Thank you so much for your time. Feel free to email me with any questions that you have at info@shelterwf.org.